Well, I hope that you have had a great day today. I hope your week is has gone well so far. Um, we're in Job chapter 15 tonight. We barely finished Job chapter 14 last week, but we got it done. So we're in Job chapter 15. I don't think we have many announcements. We do have several people to be praying for. If you're sick or hurting in any way, as always, we want to let you know that we love you and we are praying for you. And if we can do anything at all for you, we just ask that you would ask us. Job chapter 15. If you haven't read Job chapter 15, please pause the video, go read that, and then we'll be ready to dive in. But if you have, we're ready to go. So, Job chapter 15, verse 1. Now, this starts the second cycle of speeches. And as we have already seen in the first cycle, all three friends will speak. And after one friend speaks, Job will respond. The next one will speak, Job will respond. The next one will speak, Job will respond. That's the same in the second cycle of speeches. But what we notice in the second cycle of speeches is the length of Job's speeches. They can continue to be very long. So Job is using a lot of words. Well, Eliphaz, who spoke first for us in the first cycle, will speak first for us in the second cycle. He says, starting in verse 1, Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, Should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? Go back to Job chapter 4, if you would, for a second. Job chapter 4 in verse 2. Notice how he starts out. If one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? He starts out with a question. How does he start his speech in Job chapter 15? Should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Well, he starts out with a question, so his style is the same. This should a wise man. Well, who is the wise man? Well, I suppose that some people have said this is Eliphaz, but that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. It seems to be referring to Job. He says, so should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Job has said before, that we've already seen, that he is wise. He hasn't said he's wiser than everybody to ever have lived, so he's not like the wisest person to have lived. But what he does say is the friends, they think they're so wise. Well, Job says, well, guys, I know as much as you do. So he is, in his mind, I guess he's wise. But this language of fill his belly with the east wind, John Hartley in his commentary, he really does a good job, I think, explaining this. The east wind was something that was dreaded, he says, in the ancient Near East, because that wind was very, very hot. So when the east wind would blow and bring a lot of heat, people, they were very irritable. I mean, we know that. Like, you spend a lot of time outside in the summer at a pool or something. Well, at the end of the day, tempers start to flare and people are just very irritable. Well, same here. Well, what is this fill his belly? Like, what is up with that? We know with the east wind, if John Hartley is correct, what that's referring to. But what about his belly? Well, John Hartley also, I think, does a good job with this point. So he says that the belly in ancient thought was where people housed their feelings. So if you said something that had to do with your emotions or your feelings, it came from your belly. Whereas if you said something that was very reasonable, that speech would come from your heart. Well, notice where Job is speaking. He doesn't speak from his heart, where you would find a reasonable statement. he speaks from his belly. So he's speaking from his emotions. So his belly is filled with the east wind. Verse 3, should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? Well, what we know about wise people is they tend to be very, intentional with their words. So Job is speaking with windy knowledge. His words are windy. He's using a lot of words when he speaks. So we would think, okay, if wise people are intentional with what they say and Job is using a lot of useless words that don't profit anything, Job is a fool, is what is implicit in Eliphaz's second speech, or in words with which he can do no good. Verse 4, but you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. So before, in verse 3, Eliphaz might be attacking Job's desire to go before God and argue his case with God. Well, Job, you just use a lot of windy words. You use a lot of words when you speak, and guess what? God is going to judge you, and you would do no good bringing your case directly before God. Well, notice what Job's verbose speech is doing in verse 4, but you are doing away with the fear of God. Your faith, Job, is being affected by your words and hindering meditation before God. Verse 5, for your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. So in other words, Eliphaz is saying, Job, I know why you're using so many words when you speak. It's because you're guilty, Job. And guess what guilty people tend to do? They tend to want to justify their ways. They tend to want you to believe that they're not actually guilty. So they make a defense as to why, or an excuse, I guess we would say, as to why they're not guilty, and they use a lot of words that don't profit anything when they're doing this. Well, guess what, Job? You are guilty, buddy, and you're just defending yourself. And you choose the tongue of the crafty. So, Job, not only do you use a lot of words to defend yourself because you are guilty, you also, Job, use deception. You use the tongue of the crafty, the tongue of the deceit, people that deceive. Your own mouth condemns you and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Job, if you weren't guilty, you wouldn't be using so many words. Buddy, I'm not telling you that you're guilty of committing some sin. Your lips, they condemn you, Job. So in the first, 6 verses, Eliphaz's speech is very, very sharp and very intense. Verse 7, are you the first man who was born? Or were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God, and do you limit wisdom to yourself? Now, remember, Job was upset because he thought the friends were saying that they were superior to him, and therefore Job would be inferior to the friends. And Job says, I'm not inferior to you. You guys haven't told me anything that would help me in my current situation. I know everything that you've already told me. Well, Eliphaz is wanting to focus on that point now. Job, let's talk about this business of you being wise. Well, are you the first man who was born? Remember, Eliphaz and the other friends are under the impression that the older you are, the more wisdom that you have. So, Job, were you the first man who was born, or were you brought forth before the hills? Now, the hills in ancient thought were thought to be the oldest part of the earth. So, Job, were you brought forth before the hills? Because if you were brought forth before the hills, you would have a lot of wisdom. Well, have you listened in the counsel of God? Job, when God convenes his council in heaven, were you there to listen to what God has to say? Because, Job, if you were the first man born, or you were brought forth before the hills, or you were able to listen in the counsel of God, you would definitely be wiser than us, and you would definitely be wiser than the fathers. But Job, you know that's not the case, because you can't answer yes to any of those questions, buddy. And do you limit wisdom to yourself? Now, let's focus on that. Job hasn't said that he's the wisest person to ever have lived. Okay, we said that at the beginning. But Eliphaz, when Job was getting on to the friends about they haven't told him anything new that would help him get out of his current situation, and Job has known just as much as they have known. Well, Eliphaz kind of misinterpreted that, and he kind of elevates that interpretation to Job having said that he is the wisest person to ever have lived, although he didn't actually say that, but that's what Eliphaz wants us to believe. Verse 9, what do you know that we don't know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Well, Job, the feeling is mutual, buddy, because you don't know anything more than we do. You're not able to understand anything more than we're able to understand. Verse 10, both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. Now, remember, the older people are, the more wisdom they tend to have, is the thought process of Eliphaz and the other friends. Well, old people have gray hair. Well, Eliphaz says, both the gray-haired and the aged are among us. We are a part of that group, Job. There are people around us that are wise, and we are wise since we are a part of that group. And Job, they're actually older than your father. Now, there's really nothing in the text that suggests that Job's father was among them. We don't even know if Job's father is alive. There's just nothing to indicate that. But anyway, verse 11, are the comforts of God too small for you, or the word that deals gently with you? Now, hold on just a second. What's this business? Are the comforts of God too small for you? As if God has tried to comfort Job already. God hasn't said anything to Job up until this point. Well, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar believe that they are God's representatives. They speak for God, so whatever they say actually is coming from God. Well, guess what? Job hasn't heeded their comforting advice and repented of his sin that they are accusing him of. So Job has therefore rejected God's comfort. Why, verse 12, does your heart carry you away? And why do your eyes flash? Now remember what we said about the heart. The heart is where people reason. It's where their logic, I guess you could say, would lie. Well, Job, why does your heart carry you away, and why do your eyes flash? Now, John Hartley also points this out in his commentary, and I thought it was very interesting. That he argues that the eyes were closely associated with the heart, because remember, it's through our eyes that we can receive information, and that information informs the heart, and you're able to come up with a reasonable response if you need to, or you're able to think through something in a reasonable manner. Well, Job, your eyes flash, which would indicate that you are angry, my friend. Now remember, you're speaking from your belly. You're speaking because you're emotional, Job. You have a lot of hurt feelings, and Job, that's why. That's why you're using all these windy words. That's why, Job, you're using all these words that you're using, because you're angry. And your eyes, they flash. we can tell Job why you're angry. Verse 13, that you turn your spirit against God and bring such words out of your mouth. Job, your words don't honor God. They don't glorify God. They're not pleasing to God. Verse 14, what is man that he can be pure, or he who is born of a woman that he can be righteous? Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one who is abominable and corrupt, a man who drinks injustice like water. Well, we need to go back to Job chapter 4, because Eliphaz had a dream. Remember, he had this night terror. And what does he say in verse 12? Now a word was brought to me stealthily. My ear received the whisper of it amid thoughts from visions of the night when deep sleep falls on men. Dread came upon me and trembling which made all my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face, the hair of my flesh stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern its appearance. A form was before my eyes. There was silence, then I heard a voice. Can mortal man be right before God? Can a man be pure before his Maker? Well, Eliphaz is reiterating what he said in chapter 4 here in chapter 15, because he says, what is man that he can be pure? Okay. Ultimately, there is no one righteous. Everybody will do something that is displeasing to God in their life. That's what Eliphaz believes. He says, or he who is born of woman, that he can be righteous. Well, remember, we talked about that kind of in chapter 14, when Job says, man who is born of woman is full of days and full of trouble. Well, what does he mean by born of woman? Well, remember, humanity is weak. Humans are frail. Well, he's kind of getting at that again. Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones. Well, okay, why can't humans be, consistently righteous? Well, God doesn't even put trust in his holy ones, Eliphaz says. That would obviously refer to the angels. Well, the angels apparently have they have free will. They have the ability to make choices, so they can do what is right or they can do what is wrong. And the heavens are not pure in his sight. Well, this could mean the heavens could refer again to the heavenly beings and not the actual place, heaven. Verse 16, how much less one who is abominable and corrupt, a man who drinks injustice like water. Well, this abominable man is one that is just like so displeasing and repulsive in the sight of God. And he is corrupt. He's a man who drinks injustice like water. He's constantly doing evil things. Verse 17. Well, we are almost at time, and we would have to start another section, and we wouldn't finish it in the next minute and a half. So we're going to save that for next week. I hope you're doing well. I can't wait to see everybody Sunday. I hope you have a great rest of the week. God bless.